Hi, my name's Robin Hill-Page Glanden, and I'm here today to read you a story that I wrote that will be featured in the new anthology from Gravelight Press called EXHUMED. So here we go, sit back and relax, and I will read you my story called Waves. Come on, Mommy, take me to the beach, 7-year-old Dylan begged. Daddy's busy and he can't take me. I want to go make a sandcastle. Maggie sighed. She closed the romance novel she'd been reading and set down a half-empty glass of Pinot Blanc. Dylan, you know I don't enjoy sitting on the beach. Wait until your dad's finished, then go with him. He said he's going to be working for a really long time. By the time he's done, it'll be dark. I want to go now. Maggie stood up and walked to the kitchen where Gerald was halfway under the sink repairing a leaky pipe. Leaning down, Maggie asked, "How long are you going to be?" "A while," Gerald replied. "Can you take Dylan down to the beach when you're done? It'll be too late by the time I finish here. Why don't you take him this time? It's a nice day, not too hot. Can you please hand me the wrench?" Maggie removed the pipe wrench from Gerald's toolbox and passed it to him. "All right, but we're not staying long." "Okay, Dylan," Maggie said, returning to the living room. "We'll go for a little while. Go get your sand pail and shovel and grab me a beach chair." Maggie downed the rest of her wine. "And can we go to Dolly's and get a box of saltwater taffy?" "Sure, Dylan. We can get some taffy." Dylan ran off to the laundry room to fetch the beach gear. Maggie walked back to the kitchen, took a bottle of chilled Pinot Blanc out of the refrigerator, and filled her stainless steel travel mug. "We're going now, Gerald. Be back soon." "Okie doke," Gerald mumbled from under the sink. Maggie put her novel in a tote bag, then grabbed a flowered silk scarf from the hallway table and tied it over her dark brown curls. She walked with Dylan the 3 blocks from their house down to the beach at the far north end of the Rehoboth Boardwalk. It was early September. The tourist season was over and school was about to resume. The beach was deserted, much to Maggie's delight. She settled down in the weathered beach chair just shy of the shoreline as Dylan started happily digging in the wet sand. Maggie watched her young son as he laid the foundation for a sandcastle. Designing and building sandcastles was Dylan's passion. Gerald said their son would grow up to be an architect. The sun was warm and a gentle breeze came off the ocean as high tide arrived. Maggie typically didn't like to sit on the beach baking in the sun. Her fair complexion burned easily. Gerald, on the other hand, enjoyed the beach and always took Dylan along. But today's weather was pleasant and comfortable. Maggie unscrewed the lid of her travel mug and sipped the cool wine before starting chapter 5 of her novel. Despite the steamy romance that was developing between the book's main characters, Maggie began to feel drowsy. The warm sun, the cool breeze, the sound of the ocean, all of these elements were like a lullaby. Maggie's eyes grew heavy. Maggie awoke with a start. She felt disoriented, and she had no idea how long she had been asleep. The sun hid behind the clouds, and the wind had picked up. Maggie looked to her right, where Dylan had been crafting his sandcastle. The base of the castle and his shovel were there, but Dylan was gone. A moment later, she heard Dylan's voice. Looking up, she saw him out in the ocean with his head barely above water and crying for help. Maggie panicked. She jumped up, but stood paralyzed with terror. Maggie felt helpless. She didn't know how to swim. She looked around frantically, but there was no lifeguard presence during the off-season. There was no one in sight. Dylan screamed again before he vanished beneath a huge wave. Suddenly, Gerald sprinted past Maggie, stripping off his shirt and kicking off both shoes. He dove into the water and started swimming toward the spot where Dylan went under. Maggie watched as Gerald dove beneath the water, resurfaced, then dove again. He continued to search for his son. Finally, he resurfaced with Dylan and started swimming toward the shore. Gerald gently placed Dylan on the sand and started examining him as Maggie ran toward them. "Is he all right?" she asked breathlessly. Gerald didn't answer. His face was tense as he applied chest compressions. Maggie started to cry, sobs shaking her body. She turned at the sound of distant sirens. Someone must have seen what happened and phoned 911, she thought, relieved that help was so close now. 2 paramedics appeared and tended to Dylan. Gerald fell back onto the sand, soaking wet and exhausted. The paramedics placed Dylan on a stretcher. "I'll ride in the ambulance," Gerald barked at Maggie. "You get the truck and meet us at the hospital." "I want to go with you," Maggie cried. Teeth clenched, Gerald ordered, "Get the truck and follow us." He ran to catch up with the paramedics. Moments later, the emergency vehicle sped off toward the hospital. Trembling with fear, Maggie quickly gathered up their belongings and ran back to the house. She arrived at the emergency room 20 minutes later and found Gerald sitting in a chair, staring out the window. "Is he okay?" Maggie asked. "I don't know," Gerald replied, his voice shaking. "They're working on him now. Good thing I came down to tell you that I was finished working. You were gone a long time." Maggie put her arm around Gerald's shoulders. "I'm so sorry. I fell asleep. I should have been watching him." Gerald looked up at Maggie. His eyes flashed with an anger she had never seen before. "That's right. You should have been watching him. Damn it, Maggie, you had one thing to do. Watch our son." "Were you drinking?" "I really don't have to ask, do I?" "Of course you were." Double doors opened and an ER doctor emerged. With a weary expression, he approached the couple and shook his head sadly. "I'm terribly sorry. We did everything possible, but we lost him." The seasoned physician paused for a moment, knowing his words would take time to sink in. "You can go inside and see your boy in a few minutes. I'll have a nurse come get you. Again, I'm so very sorry." Maggie burst into tears and collapsed into a chair as the doctor walked away. Gerald stood frozen. Finally, he turned to Maggie. "You never wanted a child. Even after Dylan was born, you didn't want him. You always treated him more like a bother, an annoyance." Maggie gasped at the accusations. "That's not true, Gerald. No, it's true that I didn't really want children, not at first, but you wanted a son, and I wanted to give you a son because I love you. I've always loved Dylan." "Well, we no longer have a son," Gerald said, "so you should be happy now." "That's a terrible thing to say, Gerald," Maggie said tearfully. The couple stood silently for several minutes until a nurse escorted them into a room where Dylan lay lifeless on a cold metal table. A white sheet covered his entire body. The nurse gently pulled the sheet down to reveal the boy's face. Maggie sobbed quietly. Gerald's eyes filled with tears. When they returned to the waiting area, Gerald grabbed the truck keys from Maggie. Without a word, he turned and headed for the parking lot. Maggie followed behind him. Maggie walked alone toward the water. It was cloudy and cold for early September. The chilly wind blew Maggie's long white hair back away from her face. She stopped, scanning the ocean, remembering that afternoon exactly 15 years ago. She continued down toward the water's edge, moving slowly. The arthritis in her left knee was bothering her more than usual. As the waves washed over her feet, soaking her bedroom slippers, Maggie heard a voice call out, "Hey, Mom, what are you doing?" Maggie turned and gasped at the sight of her tall, handsome son. "Dylan, you're here." Dylan grinned. "Of course I'm here. Where else would I be? What are you doing in the water? You don't like the beach. And look, your slippers are all sandy and wet. Dad has breakfast ready. Blueberry pancakes, our favorite. Come on now, let's walk back to the house." "Your dad made breakfast?" "Yeah, he makes breakfast every Saturday morning. You know that. He even made that French roast coffee you like so much." Maggie walked toward Dylan slowly, confused. "Dylan, you drowned 15 years ago. And your father, 2 weeks later, he followed you into the sea. Told me he was going out for a walk but never returned. His body washed up on shore the next day. You were both gone. I was left alone. So alone. Mom, did you have that dream again? Dylan asked. Like I've suggested before, maybe you should see a therapist for a while. You keep having that same horrible dream. Yes, I guess I did have that dream again. Dylan motioned for Maggie to follow him. Come on, Mom, let's go home. Maggie turned and headed toward the boardwalk. Back at the house, as she walked up the steps to the kitchen, she felt a familiar sense of dread. Her chest tightened. She felt lightheaded. She braced herself, opened the door, and stepped into the kitchen. The stove was cold. The coffee pot was empty. The breakfast table was set with one plate, one glass, one coffee mug, one spoon, one knife, one fork. Maggie leaned wearily against the kitchen counter. Another day starting like so many others for the past 15 years. She sighed, then took the coffee carafe to the sink and filled it with water. She scooped French roast into the filter, then poured the water into the machine's reservoir. She pressed the on button. The machine sputtered into action. As Maggie watched the dark liquid trickle down into the carafe, tears streamed down her cheeks. She was so tired of it all. Dylan and Gerald would not let her follow them into the sea. She had tried, but they refused to let her go. Maggie poured a cup of coffee and added half and half. The first sip in the morning always tasted so good. Something about a steaming hot cup of coffee always brought Maggie a cozy, comforted feeling. Caffeine always seems to clear the cobwebs out of my head, she thought. Maggie sipped slowly, savoring the beverage. She cupped both hands around the mug to feel its warmth. Usually she would go back for a second cup. But this time, when she finished, she rinsed the cup and set it in the sink. Then she went to a drawer in the pantry and, after rummaging around a bit, retrieved a small box. She took a deep breath, sat down at the kitchen table, and struck a match. Maggie touched the flame to the edge of the flowered linen tablecloth. The fire spread quickly to an adjacent stack of newspapers. For the first time in so long, Maggie felt a wave of calm wash over her, followed by a quiet sense of blessed peace. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed my story today, as much as I enjoyed reading it for you, please pick up a copy of EXHUMED by gravelightpress.com. And if you would like to follow up with me a little bit more, I can be found on Facebook. My page is Robin Hill-Page Glanden. And I also have a page that features the performances that I do with my husband, Kenny. And that Facebook page is Robin plus Kenny equals 2 nice. And for some upbeat postings and sort of inspirational messages during this pandemic that we're going through, my third Facebook page is Look at the donut, not at the hole. A saying that my dad used to tell me when I was feeling a little bit down. So I hope you enjoyed my reading today. Thanks so much for tuning in.